The sound of his laughter echoed off the mahogany walls of the Superior Court of Connecticut. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It was a loud, arrogant guffaw that made the stenographer flinch. Damien Sterling, the city's most ruthless real estate mogul, looked at his wife, Axel, standing alone at the defendant's table, and laughed in her face. He had the most expensive legal team money could buy. She had a stack of handwritten notes and a trembling hand. Everyone expected a slaughter. But when Axel finally opened her mouth to speak, the laughter died instantly. What she revealed in the next 10 minutes didn't just silence the room. It made the entire court gasp. This is the story of how the underdog bit back. In the high society circles of Greenwich, Connecticut, Damien and Axel Sterling were the couple everyone watched, but for very different reasons. Damien was the sun around which their social solar system revolved, loud, charismatic, and aggressively successful. At 45, he was the CEO of Sterling and Associates, a commercial real estate firm that had reshaped the skyline of Hartford and was currently breaking ground on a contentious luxury high-rise project in Stamford. He was a man who sucked the oxygen out of every room he entered, leaving very little for anyone else. Axel, on the other hand, was the moon, pale, quiet, reflecting only his light. To the outside world, she was the quintessential trophy wife, though she lacked the predatory edge that title usually implied. She was 38, a former elementary school art teacher who had retired upon their marriage 15 years ago at Damien's insistence. She was always perfectly dressed in muted pastels, her hair always done in a soft chignon, standing exactly half a step behind Damien at charity galas and board dinners. "She's a sweet thing," Damien would often say to his business partners, clutching a scotch in one hand and draping a heavy arm around Axel's shoulders. Great with the house, terrible head for business, though. Tried to explain amortization to her once, and she asked if it was a type of flower. The men would laugh. Damien would squeeze her shoulder a little too hard. Axel would offer a tight, practiced smile and sip her sparkling water. But the reality, inside the sprawling Georgian estate on Lake Avenue, was far darker than the polished exterior. Damien wasn't just dismissive, he was systematically eroding Axel's existence. He controlled every cent. Axel had a credit card, but every purchase over $50 triggered a notification on Damien's phone, often followed by a text demanding justification. She had no access to their bank accounts, no knowledge of their investments, and no car title in her name. The breaking point didn't come with a shout, but with a whisper. It was a Tuesday in November. Axel had returned early from a charity luncheon because of a migraine. The house was quiet, the staff usually gone until the evening shift. As she walked past Damien's home office, she heard his voice. He was supposed to be in the city. "Don't worry about her, Julian," Damien was saying, his voice dripping with amusement. "She's not going to fight. She doesn't have the spine for it. I've conditioned her to be afraid of her own shadow. We offer her the guest cottage and a monthly stipend of $2,000, and she'll take it. She has to. She has literally nowhere else to go." Axel froze. Julian. That would be Julian Thorne, the divorce attorney known in New York legal circles as the Butcher. "What about the Cayman accounts?" Julian's voice came through the speakerphone, tinny but clear. "Buried," Damien scoffed. "Under 3 shell companies. She thinks my net worth is maybe $5 million. She has no idea it's closer to 80. Just draw up the papers, Julian. I want her out by Christmas so Jessica can move in before New Year's." Jessica, his 24-year-old personal assistant, the one who always looked at Axel with a mixture of pity and disdain. Axel didn't barge in. She didn't scream. She didn't confront him. The old Axel might have collapsed, crying, begging him not to leave her. But something in the cold, calculated way he spoke about conditioning. Her snapped a tether deep inside her chest. The fear that had ruled her life for 15 years evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. She retreated silently down the hall, went to the master bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the family photos on the vanity, images of a smiling, submissive woman she hardly recognized. She thinks my net worth is $5 million. Damien had made one critical error. He assumed that because Axel was quiet, she was blind. He assumed that because she was compliant, she was stupid. He had forgotten that before she was Mrs. Sterling, Axel had been Axel Vance, the daughter of a forensic accountant who had taught her how to read a ledger before she could ride a bike. She hadn't looked at the finances because Damien forbade it, and she had tried to be a good wife. But she had been watching. She had seen the mail he threw away. She had noted the late-night phone calls, and for the last 6 months, ever since she noticed the smell of a perfume that wasn't hers on his jackets, she had been keeping a journal. Axel stood up and walked to the closet. She didn't pack a bag. She reached to the very back of the top shelf, behind a stack of cashmere sweaters, and pulled out a dusty, leather-bound portfolio. It contained her old sketches. Yes, but underneath those was something else. A degree she had never used. A Juris Doctor from Yale Law School. She had passed the bar 15 years ago, 2 weeks before their wedding. Damien had laughed when she got the results. "You won't need that, babe. You're marrying a Sterling. You'll never work a day in your life." She had let her license lapse to inactive status to please him. That afternoon, while Damien was still laughing on the phone with his lawyer, Axel drove to the library. She logged on to the State Bar Association's website. It would take work, and a lot of paperwork, to reactivate her status. But she had time. When Damien served her the divorce papers 3 days later, tossing the manila envelope onto the kitchen island like it was junk mail, Axel didn't cry. She just picked it up. "Read it over," Damien said, not even looking up from his phone. Julian drew it up. "It's generous. Sign it, and we can keep this civil." Axel looked at the document. Irreconcilable differences. A settlement of $2,500 a month for 3 years. No claim to the marital home. No claim to the business assets. "I'll think about it," Axel said softly. Damien smirked. "Don't think too hard, sweetie. You might hurt yourself." The months leading up to the trial were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Damien moved Jessica into a condo downtown, but he made sure Axel knew about it. He cut off her credit cards, leaving her with only the cash she had squirreled away in a coffee tin in the pantry. About $400. He expected her to crumble. He expected her to come crawling to his office, begging for the settlement. When she didn't, he grew annoyed. "She's stalling," Damien complained to Julian Thorne during a lunch at the Capitol Grill. "It's been 3 months. Why hasn't she signed?" Julian Thorne was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and dressed in Italian silk. He swirled his wine. "She likely found some strip mall lawyer who's telling her she can get more. Don't worry. We'll bury them in motions until they run out of money." "Who is representing her?" "I don't know," Damien admitted. "I haven't received any notice of representation." "Odd," Thorne mused. "Maybe she's just in denial. We'll force a court date. That will wake her up." The court date was set for early April at the Stamford Superior Court. Judge Arthur Pendleton was presiding. This was bad news for any underdog. Judge Pendleton was known as Artie the Axe. He was an old-school conservative who valued efficiency over emotion and had a well-known bias toward the primary earner in divorce cases. He and Damien belonged to the same golf club. On the morning of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Damien Sterling's divorce was high-profile gossip. Reporters from the Stamford Advocate and a few freelancers for the New York Post were in the back row. Damien arrived with an entourage. Julian Thorne walked beside him, flanked by 3 junior associates carrying boxes of files. They looked like a battalion marching to war. Damien wore a bespoke navy suit, a Rolex that cost more than most cars, and an expression of bored confidence. They took their seats at the plaintiff's table, spreading out their documents, laptops, and legal pads. They dominated the room. Then, the heavy oak doors opened, and Axel walked in. The room went quiet, but not out of awe, out of confusion. She was alone. She wore a simple, structured black suit that she had bought at a thrift store. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She carried no briefcase, no boxes of files, just a single, slender yellow notepad and a black pen. She walked to the defendant's table and sat down. Judge Pendleton entered, his robes billowing. All rise. After the formalities, Judge Pendleton peered over his spectacles at the defense table. He looked around the empty chairs next to Axel. "Mrs. Sterling," the judge boomed, his voice impatient. "Where is your counsel? We are scheduled to begin opening statements. If your attorney is late, I will not look kindly on it." Axel stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she locked her knees. She gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. "I have no counsel, Your Honor," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't crack. A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery. Julian Thorne leaned over to Damien. "She's pro se, representing herself. This is going to be easier than I thought. She's saving us the trouble of destroying a lawyer." Judge Pendleton sighed, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Sterling, I strongly advise against representing yourself in a matter of this complexity. Mr. Sterling has substantial assets and a formidable legal team. You are putting yourself at a severe disadvantage." "I understand, Your Honor," Axel said. "But I cannot afford counsel, as my husband has frozen all marital assets." "We offered a settlement that would have provided funds for counsel," Julian Thorne interjected smoothly, standing up. "She refused it." "The settlement was insufficient, Your Honor," Axel replied. "Very well," the judge said, clearly annoyed. "If you wish to proceed pro se, that is your right. But I will not offer you special treatment. You will be held to the same standards of evidence and procedure as Mr. Thorne." "I understand," Axel said. "Mr. Thorne," the judge nodded, "you may proceed with your opening statement." Julian Thorne stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't even look at Axel. He walked to the jury box. Though this was a bench trial, he performed for the gallery. "Your Honor," Thorne began, his voice a smooth baritone. "This case is simple. It is a tragedy of a marriage that has run its course. My client, Damien Sterling, has worked tirelessly for 15 years to build an empire. He has provided a life of luxury for his wife. He has paid for the home, the clothes, the vacations. And in return, he has grown apart from a partner who contributes nothing to the marriage, neither financially nor emotionally. We are here simply to dissolve a contract. We have made a generous offer. Mrs. Sterling, driven by greed and bitterness, seeks to claim half of a business she didn't build, money she didn't earn, and a future she doesn't deserve." He turned to point at Axel. "She will try to paint herself as a victim, but the evidence will show she is simply a woman who refuses to accept that the free ride is over." Thorne sat down. Damien patted him on the back, grinning. "Mrs. Sterling," the judge said, looking at his watch, "your opening statement. Keep it brief." Axel stood up again. She picked up her notepad. She walked to the center of the room. She looked small against the high ceilings and the imposing bench. She looked at Damien. He caught her eye and winked. Then he let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound of pure derision. "Look at her," the laugh said. "Look at her trying to play dress-up." The court stenographer typed the sound. Plaintive laughs. Axel looked at the judge. She took a breath. "Your Honor," she began, "Mr. Thorne is right about one thing. This is a simple case, but it is not about a marriage running its course. It is about a 15-year fraud." Damien rolled his eyes and sighed loudly. "Mr. Sterling believes," Axel continued, her voice gaining a little strength, "that because I was silent, I was absent. He believes that because I did not earn a paycheck, I did not work. And he believes that because he hid his money in shell companies named after his mistresses, that I wouldn't find it." The room went dead silent. Damien stopped smiling. Julian Thorne froze, his pen hovering over his paper. Axel turned to the gallery, then back to Damien. "I am not here to ask for half of what Damien Sterling has declared to the IRS," she said, her voice ringing clear now. "I am here to ask for half of what he actually owns, and I intend to prove that the number on his affidavit is off by $75 million. She walked back to her table and sat down. "And," she added, looking at the stunned judge, "I would like to enter into evidence Exhibit A. A forensic accounting of the Saffron Holdings Shell Corporation, registered in the Cayman Islands, which lists Mr. Sterling as the sole beneficiary." She pulled a document from her thin folder. It wasn't a handwritten note. It was a certified bank record, stamped and notarized. Damien Sterling wasn't laughing anymore. His face had gone the color of ash. The silence in the courtroom following Axel's declaration was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. Judge Pendleton stared at the document Axel had placed on the corner of his bench. "Exhibit A," the judge repeated, picking up the paper. He adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Thorne, were you aware of this Saffron Holdings?" Julian Thorne was already on his feet, his face flushed a dark, angry red. "Objection, Your Honor. Ambush! We have not seen this document during discovery. This is trial by surprise. Furthermore, I question the authenticity of this record. It looks like a printout that could have been fabricated on a home computer." "It is a certified bank ledger from the Bank of Butterfield in Grand Cayman, Your Honor," Axel said calmly. She remained seated, her posture perfect. "If Mr. Thorne looks at the second page, he will see the notarization seal and the signature of the bank's compliance officer. As for discovery, I could not disclose it because Mr. Sterling swore under oath in his financial affidavit that this account didn't exist. I am introducing it now as impeachment evidence to prove perjury." The judge looked at Thorne, then at Damien. Damien was gripping the table, his knuckles white. He whispered furiously to Thorne. "The objection is overruled," Judge Pendleton said, his voice dropping an octave. He looked at Damien with a new expression. Suspicion. "Mr. Sterling, you are under oath. Do you deny the existence of this account?" Thorne jumped in. "My client asserts his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination regarding—" "This is a civil divorce trial, Mr. Thorne," the judge snapped, "not a criminal proceeding. If he pleads the Fifth, I am entitled to draw an adverse inference. That means I will assume the money exists and that he is hiding it." Thorne shut his mouth. He looked at Damien and gave a barely perceptible nod. "Deny it," the nod said. "Make her prove it." "Mr. Sterling," the judge asked again. "Is this your account?" Damien stood up. He buttoned his jacket, trying to regain his composure. He flashed that charming, practiced smile, the one that had sold condos to billionaires. "Your Honor, my wife is creative. She was an art teacher, after all. I have never been to the Cayman Islands for banking purposes. This is a desperate fabrication. Axel stood up. I called the plaintiff, Damien Sterling, to the stand. Thorne looked ready to object again, but he had no grounds. Damien walked to the witness box, exuding arrogance. He sat down, crossed his legs, and looked at Axel with a look of pitying amusement. "Go ahead," his eyes said. "Try to catch me." Axel walked to the podium. She didn't look at her notes. "Mr. Sterling," she began, "you stated you have never been to the Cayman Islands for banking. Have you been there for leisure?" I might have stopped there on a cruise years ago," Damien said vaguely. "Is that so?" Axel turned to the defense table and picked up a piece of paper. "Exhibit B, flight logs from your private jet, tail number N4-MS, dated November 14th last year. A flight from Teterboro to Owen Roberts International Airport, Grand Cayman. You were on the ground for exactly 4 hours before returning. That is a very short cruise, Damien." Damien shifted in his seat. I recall now. It was a fuel stop. We were heading to Brazil." "A fuel stop," Axel repeated. "Exhibit C." She held up a photograph. It was grainy, clearly taken with a telephoto lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. It showed Damien Sterling shaking hands with a man in a linen suit outside a building with a plaque that read, "Offshore Fiduciary Services." "Did you get fuel at the bank, Damien?" Axel asked. The courtroom erupted in low murmurs. Judge Pendleton banged his gavel. "Order!" Damien's face twisted. "Where did you get that?" he hissed. "That's not an answer to the question," Axel said. "But since you're curious, you hired a private investigator 3 years ago to follow a competitor, didn't you? Mr. Silas Vance?" Yes. I use Vance security sometimes." "Silas Vance is my cousin," Axel said softly. "You didn't know that, did you? You never asked about my family. You thought my maiden name, Vance, was just a coincidence. When you fired him without pay last year, he was very happy to send me his archives." Damien looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Let's talk about Saffron Holdings," Axel continued, pressing her advantage. "Why saffron, Damien? It's a spice. You hate cooking. You can't even boil water." "It was just a name," Damien muttered. "Is it?" Axel walked closer to the witness stand. "Or is it because Saffron was the name of the golden retriever we had when we first got married? The one you kicked when you thought I wasn't looking? The one that ran away the next day?" The air in the room grew frigid. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was a character assassination, and Axel was holding the knife. "Objection!" Thorne screamed. "Relevance! Prejudice!" "It goes to character, Your Honor," Axel argued calmly. "And it goes to the password for the account. I posit that the password is Saffron 2010. Would you like me to log in right now, on the court projector?" Damien slammed his hand on the witness rail. "You hacked my computer." "So the account is yours?" Axel asked sweetly. Damien froze. He had walked right into it. "No further questions for this witness," Axel said, turning her back on him. As Damien walked back to his table, he didn't look at the judge. He looked at Axel. The laughter was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He leaned over to Julian Thorne and whispered, "Destroy her. I don't care what it costs. Burn her to the ground." Julian Thorne nodded. He pulled a file from his briefcase. It was thick, black, and marked Medical History. The lunch recess was a tense affair. Axel sat alone in the court cafeteria, eating a sandwich she had packed. She knew the victory with the bank account was significant, but she also knew Damien. He wouldn't just defend himself, he would counterattack, and when Damien attacked, he went for the throat. When court reconvened, Julian Thorne looked refreshed. He stood up with a smirk that made Axel's stomach turn. "Your Honor," Thorne said, "the defense has made quite a show of sudden financial expertise. But we must address the elephant in the room. The reason Mrs. Sterling has been excluded from financial decisions, the reason she was conditioned, as she claims, is not malice. It is necessity." Thorne turned to the gallery. "We call Dr. Aris Thorne to the stand." Axel frowned. No relation to the lawyer, but a familiar name. A psychiatrist. A tall, severe-looking man walked in. Axel recognized him immediately. He was the therapist Damien had sent her to see 5 years ago, after she had suffered a miscarriage. She had seen him for 3 months. She had poured her heart out to him about her grief, her loneliness, her feeling that Damien was distant. "Dr. Thorne," Julian began, "you treated Axel Sterling 5 years ago." "I did," the doctor said. He refused to look at Axel. "And what was your diagnosis?" "Mrs. Sterling suffers from borderline personality disorder with paranoid delusions," the doctor stated flatly. "She exhibits a detachment from reality. She often invents scenarios where she is the victim to garner sympathy. She expressed deep paranoia that her husband was plotting against her." "So," Julian said, pacing, "if she were to say, claim her husband was hiding millions of dollars, or that he was abusive, this would be consistent with her delusions?" "Completely consistent," the doctor said. "She creates narratives to punish those she feels have abandoned her." Julian turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we submit that the evidence presented by Mrs. Sterling is the fruit of a paranoid obsession. We question her competency to stand trial, let alone represent herself. We move for a psychological evaluation and an immediate stay of these proceedings." The gallery murmured. This was the gaslight strategy. If they could paint her as insane, the evidence didn't matter. It was all fruit of the poisonous tree or the ramblings of a madwoman. Axel felt the blood drain from her face. She remembered those sessions. She remembered crying. She remembered trusting this man. "Your witness," Julian sneered at Axel. Axel stood up. Her hands were shaking again. She looked at the doctor. He looked smug. He was a paid gun, and he had just fired a shot that could end everything. She walked to the podium. She closed her eyes for a second, breathing in. "Focus, Axel. You prepared for this. You knew he would use the medical records." "Dr. Thorne," Axel said, "how much is my husband paying you for your testimony today?" "I am being compensated for my time at my standard hourly rate," the doctor sniffed. "Your standard rate is $400 an hour," Axel said. "Exhibit D." She held up a bank transfer record. "Can you explain why Sterling Development LLC transferred $50,000 into your personal account last Tuesday?" The doctor blinked. That is a retainer for future consultation." $50,000 for consultation? Axel raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of hours, doctor. But let's talk about your diagnosis. You said I have borderline personality disorder." "Yes." "Did you prescribe medication?" I recommended therapy." "Did you prescribe medication?" she pressed. "No." "Isn't it standard practice to prescribe mood stabilizers for severe BPD?" "Every case is different." Axel picked up a blue folder. "Dr. Thorne, are you aware that recording a patient session without their consent is illegal in Connecticut?" The doctor stiffened. "I never recorded our sessions." "No," Axel said. "But I did." A collective gasp went through the room. Even the judge sat up straighter. "I recorded every session on my phone," Axel said, holding up an old iPhone. "Because I felt confused. I wanted to listen back, to understand what was wrong with me. And do you know what I found on those recordings, Doctor? She didn't wait for an answer. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I would like to play a 30-second clip from our final session. Exhibit E. She pressed play and held the phone up to the microphone. The audio was clear. Axel's voice, sobbing. I just feel like he hates me, like I'm a burden. Dr. Thorne's voice. Axel, listen to me. Damien is a powerful man. He has needs you aren't meeting. You are depressed, yes, but you aren't crazy. You're just inconvenient. If you want my advice, stop asking questions. Take the pills I give you to sleep and let him be. It's not a disorder, Axel. It's your situation. You're married to a narcissist. But if I write that down, he'll stop paying the bill. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. Dr. Thorne looked like he was about to vomit. Julian Thorne had his head in his hands. You knew I wasn't sick, Axel whispered into the microphone. You knew I was being abused. And you took his money to tell me it was all in my head. You gaslit me for a paycheck. Your Honor, Julian Thorne shouted, jumping up. This is— Sit down, Mr. Thorne, Judge Pendleton roared. His face was purple with rage. He turned to the witness. Dr. Thorne, you will step down immediately, and you will not leave this building. I am having the bailiff escort you to a holding room until the district attorney can get here. Perjury and medical malpractice are things I take very seriously. As the bailiffs dragged the sputtering doctor away, Axel looked at Damien. He wasn't angry anymore. For the first time in 15 years, Damien Sterling looked terrified. But Axel wasn't done. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, that concludes my cross-examination. However, the plaintiff's attempt to use my mental health against me opens the door for me to call a character witness of my own. Someone who knows the intimate details of Mr. Sterling's life. Someone Mr. Thorne mentioned in his opening statement. She turned to the back of the courtroom. The heavy doors opened. I called Jessica Miller to the stand. Damien's head whipped around. Jessica, his mistress, the woman he was planning to move into the house next week. She walked down the aisle, but she wasn't wearing the designer clothes Damien bought her. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. She looked tired, she looked angry, and she was holding a thick stack of papers. Damien stood up. Jessica, what are you doing? She didn't look at him. She walked past him, the scent of her perfume trailing behind her, the same perfume Axel had smelled on Damien's jacket. She took the stand. Ms. Miller, Axel said gently, please state your relationship to the plaintiff. Jessica looked at Damien, her eyes cold. I was his personal assistant and his mistress. And she paused, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. And I am the mother of his unborn child. The courtroom gasped again, but the real twist was yet to come. And why are you testifying for me today, Jessica? Axel asked. Jessica pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. Because yesterday, while Damien was at pre-trial with his lawyers, I found an email on his iPad. He left it open on the kitchen counter. She handed the paper to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Read it, please, Axel said. Jessica's voice trembled. It's an email to Julian Thorne. It says, once the divorce is final and I get the house, we need to deal with Jessica. She's getting clingy. Set up the cleaner account. We'll dump the toxic assets from the Stamford project into her name, frame her for the embezzlement, and let the feds take her. I can't have a kid dragging me down right now. I need a clean slate. Damien Sterling collapsed into his chair. It wasn't just a loss. It was a massacre. He was going to send me to prison, Jessica sobbed. He was going to frame me and leave his own baby to be born in jail. Axel looked at Damien, the man who had laughed at her, the man who had silenced her. No further questions, Axel said. The email Jessica Miller had read aloud hung in the air like toxic smoke. Frame her for the embezzlement. I can't have a kid dragging me down. Damien Sterling sat slumped in his chair, staring at the mahogany table as if trying to will himself into another dimension. His lawyer, Julian Thorne, was furiously typing on his BlackBerry, sweat beading on his forehead. The shark had become the bait. Mr. Thorne, Judge Pendleton's voice was dangerously low. I suggest you put your phone away, unless you are calling a criminal defense attorney for yourself, in which case I will allow it. Thorne stood up, his usual smoothness replaced by a frantic, jerky energy. Your Honor, I move to withdraw as counsel immediately. I was not aware of my client's intentions to obstruct justice or frame a third party. I cannot ethically represent him. Sit down, Mr. Thorne, the judge barked. You are the captain of this ship, and you are not getting in a lifeboat while it's hitting the iceberg. We are finishing this trial. Today. The judge turned to Axel. Mrs. Sterling, in light of this explosive testimony, do you have further evidence regarding the toxic assets mentioned in the email? Axel nodded. She walked back to her table. She looked tired, but her eyes were burning with a fierce intensity. She picked up a heavy roll of documents, architectural blueprints. Exhibit F, Your Honor, Axel said, unrolling the blueprints on the clerk's desk. These are the structural plans for the Stamford high-rise project, the jewel of Sterling and Associates. Damien looked up. Those are proprietary. You can't show those. I can when they prove you are committing insurance fraud on a massive scale, Axel shot back. She pointed to a section of the blueprints marked with red ink. I found these in a safe in the basement. Damien thought I didn't know the combination. It was his birthday. Narcissists never use random numbers. She turned to the gallery, making sure the reporters in the back could hear. These plans show that the foundation of the high-rise is being built on a Class C wetland. The geological survey, which I have here, marked Exhibit G, explicitly states that the ground is unstable and cannot support a structure of 40 stories. It requires reinforced steel pilings that cost $10 million. She held up a financial ledger. But looking at the construction budget, there is no line item for steel pilings. Instead, there is a $10 million payment to a consulting firm called Apex Solutions. Axel looked at Julian Thorne. Mr. Thorne, isn't Apex Solutions the name of the LLC that owns your vacation home in the Hamptons? Thorne went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He bribed the safety inspector, Axel said, her voice trembling with rage. He paid off the inspector through his lawyer to ignore the geological report. They are building a 40-story death trap. If that building goes up and people move in, it will collapse within 5 years. The courtroom was in an uproar. This wasn't just divorce drama anymore. This was a potential mass casualty event in the making. Damien stood up, his face red and veins bulging in his neck. You shut up! You don't know what you're talking about. It's business. It's how the world works. You're just a stupid art teacher. I am a mother, Axel shouted back, her voice cracking like a whip. And you were going to frame the mother of your unborn child for this? You were going to put Jessica in prison for embezzlement so that when the building collapsed, the investigation would point to her looting the safety budget. Damien lunged toward her. Bailiffs! Judge Pendleton screamed. 2 officers tackled Damien before he got within 5 feet of Axel, slamming him back into his chair. One more move, Mr. Sterling, the judge said, his voice shaking with anger, "and I will have you shackled to that table." Axel took a deep breath and smoothed her skirt. She looked at Jessica, who was weeping silently in the witness box. "I have one last piece of evidence regarding this fraud," Axel said quietly. "And this is the one that breaks my heart." She held up a single sheet of paper. It was a permit application for the Stamford project. "At the bottom of this fraudulent application," Axel said, "is a signature. It authorizes the use of substandard concrete." She held it up. The signature reads, "Axel Sterling." The room went quiet. "He forged my signature," Axel whispered. "He made me the fall guy. If I hadn't found these papers, if I hadn't fought back, I would be the one going to prison when that building fell." Damien was panting, his tie askew. "You can't prove I signed it. It's your name. It's your signature." "Actually," Axel said, a sad smile touching her lips, "I can prove it wasn't me." "How?" Damien sneered. "It looks exactly like your handwriting. I practiced it for you." He stopped himself, biting his tongue hard. "You practiced it," Axel nodded, "but you missed one detail. The date on this document is October 14th of last year." She turned to the judge. "On October 14th, I was in the hospital, Your Honor. I was having surgery on my right hand, my writing hand, to repair a tendon I severed while gardening. My arm was in a cast from fingertips to elbow. I couldn't hold a pen for 6 weeks." She held up her medical discharge papers. "Checkmate, Damien." The reality of the situation seemed to crash down on Damien Sterling all at once. The defiance drained out of him, leaving a hollow, trembling shell. He looked at Julian Thorne, but his lawyer was currently busy trying to shove documents into his briefcase, clearly planning a hasty exit. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Pendleton said coolly, "the bailiff has locked the doors. No one leaves." Thorne dropped his briefcase. Axel stood at the center of the storm she had summoned. She felt a strange sense of calm. The fear she had lived with for 15 years, the fear of his anger, his judgment, his control, was gone. He was just a small, greedy man in a bad suit. "Your Honor," Axel said. "The defense rests." "I should hope so," Judge Pendleton muttered. He looked at Damien. "Mr. Sterling, do you have any rebuttal? Any explanation for the forged signatures, the bribes, the shell companies, or the plan to frame your mistress?" Damien looked up. His eyes were wet. He looked towards the gallery, perhaps hoping for a friendly face, but saw only the flashing cameras of the press capturing his downfall. I built this city," Damien whispered hoarsely. "I'm a pillar of the community." "You are a termite in the foundation," Judge Pendleton corrected him. Before the judge could render his verdict on the divorce settlement, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom, which the bailiff had just unlocked, swung open with a forceful bang. 6 men and women in windbreakers walked in. The bold yellow letters on their backs left no room for interpretation. FBI. Leading them was a woman with steely grey hair and a face that looked like it had seen everything. She walked straight to the prosecutor's table, ignoring the stunned silence of the gallery. "Agent Diana Rossi, FBI White Collar Crimes Division," she announced, flashing her badge to the judge. "We apologize for the interruption, Your Honor. We have been monitoring Mr. Sterling for 6 months regarding a wire fraud investigation. However, the testimony given in this court today regarding the structural integrity of the Stamford project and the conspiracy to frame Ms. Miller has accelerated our timeline." She turned to Damien. "Damien Sterling, you are under arrest." She turned to Julian Thorne. "And you, Julian Thorne. Conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of a public official, and racketeering." Julian Thorne let out a high-pitched whimper as an agent handcuffed him. Damien didn't struggle this time. He stood up slowly, as the agent clicked the cuffs onto his wrists, cold, heavy steel. He looked at Axel. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "You ungrateful bitch. You'll get nothing. The government will seize it all. We'll both be destitute." Axel walked up to him. She was close enough to smell the fear sweat on him. "You're wrong, Damien," she said softly. She turned to Agent Rossi. "Agent Rossi, before you take him, as part of my divorce settlement, which I am requesting the judge to finalize immediately, I have a specific request regarding the asset division." "Go ahead," the agent said, intrigued. Axel turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I am fully aware that the Sterling and Associates assets, the Stamford project, and the Cayman accounts are now proceeds of crime and will be seized by the federal government." "That is correct," the judge said. "There is likely nothing left to divide." "Not everything," Axel said. "There is one asset Damien never touched, one asset he mocked, one asset he kept entirely in my name because he thought it was worthless." She pulled a deed from her folder. "The plot of land on the north side of town, the old mill property. Damien bought it 10 years ago to dump construction waste, then transferred the deed to me as a birthday present, so the liability for the cleanup would be in my name. He valued it at $0. Damien's eyes widened. "That dump? Take it. It's full of asbestos." "It was," Axel said. "But I used my allowance to pay for a cleanup crew 3 years ago, slowly, quietly. And last month, the city council rezoned that area." She smiled. "It's no longer industrial waste, Damien. It's the designated site for the new tech corridor. That dump is now worth $12 million. And because you put it solely in my name to avoid liability, and because it has no connection to your fraud, the feds can't touch it." Damien's jaw dropped. The color drained from his face completely. He realized the magnitude of his mistake. In his arrogance to burden her with trash, he had gifted her a gold mine. "And," Axel added, "I am also requesting full legal custody of the dog, the one you said ran away. I know you gave him to your secretary. I want him back." "Granted." Judge Pendleton slammed his gavel. "Marriage dissolved. The plaintiff is awarded the old mill property and all assets solely in her name. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the FBI." 2 agents grabbed Damien by the arms as they dragged him out. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't shouting. He was staring at Axel with a look of total bewilderment. He had played checkers while she was playing 4D chess. As he passed Jessica Miller, who was still sitting in the witness box, Damien paused. "I'm sorry," he whispered. It was a pathetic attempt. Jessica looked at him, her hand on her belly. "My child will never know your name," she said coldly. The doors closed behind him. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were shouting questions. The judge was calling for order, but he was smiling. Axel stood alone at the table. She packed her notepad. She capped her pen. She didn't look triumphant. She just looked free. Agent Rossi walked up to Axel. "That was impressive, Mrs. Sterling. We've been trying to pin Thorne for years. You handed him to us on a platter. If you ever need a job." Axel laughed, a genuine warm sound. "I think I might reopen my law practice, Agent. I have a feeling there are a lot of women like me who need a voice." "I think you're right," Rossi said. "Good luck." Axel turned to leave, but there was one loose end. Jessica. The young woman was sitting on a bench near the exit, looking terrified and lost. She had no money, a baby on the way, and she had just helped send the father to prison. Axel walked over to her, the mistress and the wife. Jessica looked up, shrinking back. "I'm so sorry, Axel. I didn't know he was stealing from you. I didn't know about the framing until yesterday." Axel looked at the young woman. She saw the fear she used to feel. She saw the vulnerability. "He used us both, Jessica," Axel said. "He pitted us against each other so we wouldn't look at him." Axel reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, her own, freshly printed that morning at Kinko's. Axel Sterling, attorney at law. "You're going to need a lawyer," Axel said. "The feds will want to question you. You're going to need help with the baby, and you're going to need a place to stay." Jessica took the card, her hands shaking. I can't afford a lawyer." "Pro bono," Axel said. "On the house?" "Why?" Jessica asked, tears spilling over. "Why would you help me?" Axel looked back at the empty seat where Damien used to sit. "Because the best revenge," Axel said, "is proving him wrong about everything. He said we were weak. He said we were enemies. We're going to show him we're strong. Together." Axel offered her hand. Jessica took it. Together, they walked out of the courtroom and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the afternoon. 1 year later, the morning sun hit the glass facade of the newly constructed Vance Legal Center in North Stamford. It was a sleek, modern building, sitting right in the heart of what was now called the Innovation District, formerly the old mill dump site. Axel sat in her corner office, but she wasn't hiding behind the desk. She was sitting on the floor, reviewing a case file, while a 10-month-old baby boy crawled over her legs, drooling onto a briefing regarding a class-action lawsuit against a corrupt pharmaceutical company. "I think Leo agrees with the motion to dismiss," Axel laughed, picking up the baby. Jessica Miller walked in, carrying 2 lattes. She looked different. The heavy makeup and nervous energy were gone. She wore a smart blazer and glasses, looking every bit the paralegal she had become. She was studying for her LSATs at night. "The meeting with the city council is in 10 minutes, Jessica said, taking her son, Leo, from Axel. "They want to give you a key to the city for the pro bono work we did for the tenants of the collapsed slumlord building." "Tell them I'll be there," Axel said, standing up and brushing dog hair off her skirt. Her golden retriever, Barnaby, formerly lost, now very much found, was sleeping under her desk. "Oh," Jessica added, her face darkening slightly. "There's mail." She placed a plain white envelope on the desk. It had a stamp from FCI Danbury, a low-security federal correctional institution. Axel looked at the envelope. It was from inmate 78440000554. Damien. For a moment, the old anxiety tried to flare up. But it was weak, a ghost of a feeling that no longer had power. She picked up the letter opener, a silver one she had bought with her own money, and slit the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, written in frantic, scrawled handwriting. "Axel, I know you're angry, but you have to help me." Thorne turned on me. He gave them everything to cut a deal. They're adding 15 years to my sentence for the racketeering charges. I'm in here with animals, Axel. The food is inedible. The bed is a slab. I heard about the old mill sale. 12 million? You owe me half of that. I bought that land. I gave it to you. Technically, it was a marital asset. If you don't send me money for an appeal, I will sue you from in here. I still have connections. Don't think you've won. Be a good girl. Help me. And tell Jessica I want to see my son. Damien Axel read it twice. Then she started to laugh. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unburdened freedom. It was the laugh of a woman who realized that the monster under her bed was just a pile of dirty laundry. "What does he say?" Jessica asked, bouncing Leo on her hip. "He says he wants money," Axel said, wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. and he thinks he still has connections. Axel walked over to the large flat-screen TV on the wall and turned on the local news. "Breaking news," the anchor announced. "The demolition of the unfinished Sterling high-rise began today. The structure, deemed unsafe due to foundation fraud, is being razed to make way for a public park. The park will be named the Miller Vance Community Garden in honor of the whistleblowers who saved the city from a potential tragedy." On the screen, a massive wrecking ball smashed into the concrete of Damien's legacy. It crumbled into dust. Axel picked up her phone. She didn't write a letter back. She simply took a photo of the TV screen, showing his empire falling. Then she took a selfie of her and Jessica, smiling, with baby Leo between them and the golden retriever in the background. She printed the photo. She took a red marker and wrote one sentence on the back. "He has your eyes, but my last name." She put the photo in an envelope and sealed it. "Send this," Axel said to Jessica, "and then block the number of the prison. We have work to do." Jessica smiled, a genuine, bright smile. "Consider it done, boss." Axel walked to the window and looked out at the city. She wasn't Mrs. Sterling anymore. She wasn't the invisible wife. She was Axel Vance. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't just watching the world go by. She was building it. And that is how the invisible wife brought down a titan. Damien Sterling thought he could erase Axel, that he could use people like chess pieces and laugh when they fell. But he forgot the most important rule of nature. The quietest rivers hide the deepest currents. Axel didn't just win a divorce. She reclaimed her voice, saved a young mother, and prevented a catastrophe, proving that true power isn't about how loud you shout, but how hard you fight when your back is against the wall. What do you think? Did Damien get what he deserved, or should the sentence have been harsher? And what would you have done if you found those blueprints? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy tale coming up next week about a lottery winner whose family tried to commit him to an asylum to steal his ticket. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.